Hey guys, so this is going to be my week 3 top values for a running back for DFS on DraftKings this week. To start us off for my first pick for top values is going to be Damien Pierce for the Houston Texans. Week 2, we saw Damien Pierce get all the carries for that Houston offense when they nearly pulled off the upset against Denver playing away. He also saw 8.7 fantasy points on 1 reception and 15 rush attempts for 69 yards. This week he's got a matchup against the Chicago Bears away, but the Bears have allowed at least 150 yards rushing in the first 2 games so far this season. He really took over the role again last week in week 2 over Rex Burkhead. I think this is going to be a really good position to have a breakout game to really live up to the hype that he received over the preseason. He's at a $5,000 price point, being a great value and a great position to really smash for a big fantasy day for week 3. My number 2 value for week 3 is going to be Daryl Henderson Jr. for the Los Angeles Rams. For week 1, he had 13 attempts for 47 yards, with 5 targets and 5 receptions, having a 12.3 fantasy day. Last week against Atlanta, he also saw 10 attempts for 47 yards and a touchdown that really salvaged his fantasy day for week 2. With a pretty high totaled game against Arizona this week, the Cardinals have allowed over 100 yards rushing in the first 2 weeks of the NFL season. Seeing that he got 5 targets in week 1, I think that last week having no targets against the Atlanta Falcons is going to be a bit of an anomaly. I feel like he definitely has a good role as far as catching the ball out of the backfield in comparison to Cam Akers. And it's also a good way to pivot off of any kind of Matthew Stafford stacks as well, to really take advantage of that exposure that a lot of the field's going to have on those pass catchers and that passing attack from Matthew Stafford as well. Also, when just watching a game, or watching the past 2 games really, for Buffalo and Atlanta for the against the LA Rams, in comparison to Cam Akers, it just seems like Henderson just has the extra gear. Is a more versatile back, can offer many different looks for defenses to defend him. I just see him having being really the better all-around back for the Rams. So I like Daryl Henderson here at $5,700. He's a very good value and doesn't exactly break the bank for you this week in week 3. My number 3 pick this week is going to be David Montgomery going up against the Houston Texans. Last week he finally came through for a good fantasy day at 18.6 fantasy points. Saw 2 receptions and 15 rushing attempts for 122 yards. He was able to have that good of a fantasy day and didn't even get into the end zone. He got you that 100-yard rushing bonus, and he's looking at a good matchup at home against the Houston Texans, who have allowed over 160 yards rushing in the first 2 games on the season so far. So with them playing at home with a good matchup against the Houston Texans, getting a lion's share of the backfield touches, averaging at 16 attempts with about roughly 3 targets a game, look for David Montgomery to have another good week in fantasy production for you at a $5,900 price point. My 4th value for running backs this week is going to be Leonard Fournette for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Leonard Fournette has seen over 20 touches in the backfield for the first 2 weeks of the NFL season. He's also seen at least 2 receptions as well in the past 2 weeks for each of the games. They got a pretty good matchup at home against the Green Bay Packers, who's allowed 150 yards in rushing for the first 2 weeks of the NFL season. Another thing that I like to note that I think was pretty cool was that he tweeted out to fantasy owners that he promises touchdowns are on their way going into week 3. So I'm going to take his word for it. I like the matchup against Green Bay. At $6,500, he definitely has a lot of value. Also learning that Mike Evans is going to be suspended 1 game for his brawl with Marshawn Lattimore. Really tells me that he's in line to get more targets should Julio Jones, Mike Evans be out as well, and also Chris Godwin still getting up to speed on that hamstring injury as well. So look for Leonard Fournette to have another solid fantasy week after having basically a down week against a tough run defense in New Orleans Saints. My last and final pick for week 3 comes with a bit of a caveat. So my last value is going to be Austin Ekeler at $8,000. Now, you're probably thinking $8,000 is not exactly a value. Well, being that Justin Herbert's not exactly guaranteed to start this week, and they're got a pretty tough matchup against a Jacksonville defense who's only allowed about 50 or 60 yards rushing so far in the first 2 weeks of the NFL season. I think that if Justin Herbert is out, they're going to have to really focus in on Austin Ekeler to have some short receptions to really take over the backfield, contrary to what's happened so far for that offense in the first 2 weeks. One thing I've noticed is how really the first half and the first few drives of the third quarter, you're really seeing a heavy rotation with Josh Kelly, Sony Michel, and Austin Ekeler for basically the first 2.5 quarters of the game. And then the fourth quarter, Austin Ekeler just basically takes over the backfield touches entirely. I know that early in the season, in the preseason, he had said that he had asked for a smaller workload to help out with the longevity of his career, but I think that is very noticeable of the type of spark that he provides to offense when he's on the field versus when Sony Michel or Josh Kelly are in there. So again, it's a bit of a caveat with this one. If Justin Herbert's in, then I would be less likely to throw him into a lineup. But being that Justin Herbert is dealing with a fractured cartilage in his ribs, I like Austin Ekeler in that spot should Chase Daniels start this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. All right. So that's my top values at running back this week for DFS. Heading into week 3 of the NFL season, like the video and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Drop a comment on some of your top values at running back this week for DFS on DraftKings. Thank you guys for watching. Come back for more fantasy football content on the YouTube channel. Thank you.